Hi everybody. My name is Rahim Jina. We're going to look at I suppose, a snapshot of the vulnerability landscape over the last year, 2015. Um, just a quick overview of what I'm going to be talking about. Answer hopefully a few questions such as who am I, why am I here, what am I talking about, those kind of things. So quickly, just a little quick thing on myself. The name's Rahim Jina. I don't have an Irish name, and I don't probably look very Irish, but I'm actually Irish. Currently I'm a director with a company called EdgeScan. A very brief piece on that coming up, because the data we're talking about is gathered from this. It's a managed service. I was head of security for a company called Finality, based here in Los Angeles. Lived here for a number of years. I lived quite close to here, so it's actually lovely to be back. And thankfully, my wife allowed me to come all the way over because we have a 3-year-old. I abandoned her with our 3-year-old and our 3-month-old, so I should be very thankful for her for that. I work here in Los Angeles, so yeah. It's great to be back. It's great to be back. I've been drying my bones for the last 2 days because it's been extra wet in Ireland over the last period. Regarding OWASP, I have been, I suppose, a participator, contributor since 2008. Went to a number of summits. I suppose contribution-wise, would have been involved in the first code review guide, along with my co-director and the CTO of EdgeScan, Owen Keary, who's actually talking tomorrow. Interesting guy. Just being generally involved with OWASP for a long time, was part of the Irish chapter and that kind of stuff as well. I've been in application security, I guess, for about the past 11 years. I was a developer in a former life. Then I decided it was more fun to break things, so I went on this sort of the attack side. And you know what? That's all well and good, and it's fun and it's interesting, but I suppose getting a little bit older now, I'm more interested in there's always attacks and there's always breaches and hacks and everything, but I suppose the bigger problem is trying to fix these things. So I'm trying to spend more of my time doing that, and that's really where we were going with EdgeScan, to be part of that. So why are we here? Well, as I said, we're here to look at the statistics, I suppose. Try to make statistics a little bit sexy. We're going to be looking at, I suppose, a snapshot of the different types of vulnerabilities that we've seen over the last year. But I suppose before we even get to that point, I suppose I need to give you a bit of context around where the data came from, and just sort of have it in your head where we got these things. So I suppose regarding how we measure risk, I suppose we ask ourselves, what is a risk? It's the probability of an undesired outcome. And I suppose the aim here, is to statistically reduce this probability. That's what we all want to do to, have a better security posture. Regarding how we measure risk, I suppose the platform itself, EdgeScan, as I said briefly, it's a managed service. Now, this is pretty much all I'm going to go into EdgeScan as a piece, but the background is it'll help frame where we got the data. It's a continuous testing platform, and it's full stack. So we're looking at web apps, hosts, servers, any type of server, you name it. We're looking at everything, and we're doing continuously. What does continuous mean? It can be anything. It's at least monthly, and then as granular as nearly every week or every few days. So it depends on the host or whatever we're testing. There's a human involved in verification, so whatever vulnerabilities are found, one of our engineers in our SOC has actually looked at it and has said, yes, this is actually a vulnerability. So we're hoping there's no false positives in there, but I suppose you can never really say that. Nobody's complained yet, anyway, that's for sure. That then feeds into our analytics and metrics, and then we do sort of a delta analysis, and that way we can then track trending over time. For our clients, is their posture getting better? Is their posture getting more insecure? This kind of stuff. So why do an annual report? Well, I suppose the service itself is in its 3rd year. First year, we didn't, we had starting up, so we had a certain amount of data. Last year was the first year we did a stats report, the 2014 one, and I suppose at that point we decided we had enough data there to actually get a good statistical sample. The difference in the sample between 2014 and 15 is increased quite dramatically. So all the time we're sort of gathering more information. And I suppose, we sort of felt to ourselves, we have all this data, let's do something cool with it. We have all these different types of clients across these different industries, and it's good to see the different types of problems that they're all facing. And then obviously then the aim is we can ask ourselves some of these questions such as, what's the most effective thing I can do as a business owner or a security person in my organization to improve my security posture? We want to know what the root cause of a lot of the issues are. And basically, I suppose the aim of this whole presentation and the stats report itself is to maybe give organizations a few things they can do, a few either processes they can improve on, a few different policies or whatever that, a few different ways that you can make an impact on your own security posture. As well, it's always good to know what other people are doing. It's good to know what your neighbor's doing. So where the numbers come from, this is just a quick industry split across different verticals. The sample space, or the timing, I suppose, it's the 2015 report, but we collated at the end of, we published it in December last year. So the data was from 1st of December 2014 to the end of November 2015. The sample size, without getting into exact numbers, we're talking about thousands of assets. Now, how we classify an asset is, it depends. It can be a number of different things. An asset can be a single web application. An asset could be a single IP address. An asset could be a combination of both. An asset could be a block, 256 IPs, could be 1,000, could be 10,000. So we classify things based on how our customers want their view of the world. So, and from there, then that's where we draw the lines of the different silos of data. So, the year in review. Well, I suppose every year, you read the Verizon breach report and all these other reports. Everyone always goes on, this year is the year of the breach. They just keep happening. They just keep getting worse. Every year is the year of the breach. I suppose the stats here only go up to September, but I suppose finding bugs and hacks are, they're sort of easier. People are, the industry itself, the spend is increasing dramatically. The problem doesn't seem to be getting better; it seems to be getting worse. It's interesting there. Even the Experian one was through the T-Mobile hack. I actually had my own personal data taken in that one as well. So it's weird that you trust your data with certain companies, and it's not even their fault. They may have a good posture, and it's through the data they share through somebody else that that there's the leak, there's the records gone. So it's interesting as an individual to be affected by these types of large breaches. And again, it's a little bit of a Groundhog Day with the overview. There wasn't a huge difference between the 2014 review and the 2015 one. We did do the stats a little bit differently, and we were able to tease out a few different sort of trends that we'll get to at the very end. But again, year of the breach, it keeps getting worse. I think in the Verizon breach report this year, there was an estimated $400 million loss on 700 million records stolen. So I mean, that's pretty phenomenal, if you ask me. So into the statistics side of things. Okay, we're going to start off with web apps. So it's the likelihood of these different types of class of vulnerability being discovered in a web app. Now, when we talk about host layer stuff, I'll go through why we split it up this way. But on the bottom end, we've got injection attacks. Other injection there is everything from OS injection, command injection, that kind of thing. SQL injection, thankfully, actually, it seems to be getting lower, so that's good. I suppose the different types of frameworks that are out there. If you're using the frameworks as they're intended to be used, they're protecting against a lot of it's making it harder to write bad SQL code to out of the box. So I suppose that's a good thing. Again, the impact on those kind of issues is, can be quite big. For XSE, that's actually new on the list this year. External entity attacks. external entity. Yeah. So that's, I would think that there have been improvements in a lot of the tools that test for these things over the last year or two that actually been making finding these issues a bit more, I suppose, finding them and a bit more accurate. What's next? Few more things. Authentication, information leakage, and session management issues. They're all sort of racking up there a little bit. Session management issues there can be anything relating to how sessions there between the cookies and all those types of things. Content injection and XSS. XSS is nearly always high on the list. In fact, I think the density of an XSS issue was, I think we had 4.87 instances per web app in our system. Now, that's not to say every web app had an XSS issue. We had obviously none, some sites with nothing, and then we actually had one site with close on 1,000 instances. So the prevalence can be quite big. Some apps had hundreds as well. So XSS is always a big one, and to be honest, it's not really improving in what we're seeing at all. Why? I don't know. There's probably a number of reasons, but content injection there is an interesting one too. What we're talking about there is, I suppose, broadly you could term an HTML injection. Basically everything you can do with XSS, but you're not injecting scripts. So you're able to inject arbitrary HTML. You can use that for certain types of phishing attacks, site defacements, things like that. So that was pretty prevalent as well. And then I suppose the worst was SSL issues related to web apps was by far. So nearly 2/3 of the web apps that we had under management had some kind of SSL issue. Right, root cause now on hosting layer. So we decided to split web app and hosting a little bit because it just made sense to group vulnerabilities that way. What we did here though is we grouped by root cause instead of issue type, vulnerability type. So there was a few reasons for that. One is that a large part of the issues that we'll see now when we get to the worst part of this, if you're thinking about hosting layer stuff, it's known vulnerabilities, things with CVEs attached to them, very specific issues that are found in very specific technologies. If we had have grouped them that way, we probably would have ended up with 20, 30 different lollipops there, each maybe 1% to 2% for each specific issue. Didn't really seem to make sense to do it that way, so we decided to group it this way. Unsupported system, 5% of systems out there are actually deprecated that we found. So there's not even patches being released for them. Exposed services, things like on your web app you've got Telnet open, things like that. Silly little things just that should be locked down. Misconfiguration, that's sort of a broad one as well, but also covers things like your out of the box and default settings on different services. But by far the worst was patching, and actually there's sort of an overarching trend coming through with patching. You'd like to think, okay, the worst vulnerabilities are going to be something really cool and whatever, but it actually patching was the main reason actually for a lot of these problems. So all in all, we've 15.1% of our assets had a higher critical risk vulnerability. I mean, that's very high to me. If you think about an enterprise application, let's say you're a large enterprise, you have 100 applications maybe, business critical systems, 15 of them have a higher critical risk issue. That's huge. If you think critical risk there, we're basically saying you are in imminent threat of being breached or you already have been breached. High risk then as well, it's likelihood is pretty high that a breach could happen at any point. I.e. mainly down through the fact that the issue, the vulnerability is easy to exploit, freely available, or the impact if it is breached is actually very high. So yeah, pretty high there. Just a quick slide on the risk density then as broken down per app layer versus hosting layer. I suppose the root cause for a lot of the app layer stuff there were insecure coding practices, and then it actually comes down to poor component management, which is a big trend that I'll talk about in a few slides from now. Vulnerabilities include, remote code execution, that kind of thing. In the host layer, a lot of it was, there was a lot of SSL related stuff last year. I suppose if you think about all the different types of problems that were with crypto over the last year or two, Poodle and then Logjam and things like that, they were very common. And interestingly enough, actually, Apache, Adobe, and Microsoft were the most common systems and services that had with the highest risk density. Now, I suppose I would hate to, it's not. I suppose I would hate to draw a conclusion that it's down to problems in those specific technology sets. I mean, you think about it, it's a popularity thing as well. Most of the systems that we would find would have one or a combination of them. Plus, the products that they have, the range is so broad as well, as opposed to more niche technologies. So I would hate to say, it's Microsoft products, or you draw a conclusion there that they're not, secure in some way. My favorite stat: time to remediation. So this was down to for critical high risk issues, and I suppose we'll take each one in turn there. Component security and component management was pretty much one of the main things that seems to be nearly forgotten about. Now, what we're saying here is we've got green as best case average now, and then the blue is worst case average. So for component security, and what do we mean by component security? All the frameworks that we use. So .NET MVC, Zend, Struts, Spring, all those different types of frameworks, Hibernate, all those things. What we're saying is that the best case, it might take a month to patch an issue there, fix an issue. Worst case was you're close to nearly a year. And this is for a critical / high risk issue that's been reported for that particular framework. So your window for attack there is huge. Now we will go into component security a little bit in a little bit, but I suppose there's issues there when you think about it. Developer code. This is the stuff that your devs are in charge of, that your devs write. Best case 22, again, average. Some people were on top of stuff, had them fixed within a day or two. Worst case, a little bit longer. For developers, it did seem to, and I suppose this makes sense as well, if you think about it logically, for older web deployments, the older code, legacy code, obviously they took longer because they might not necessarily have the people who remembered what was there. They might have to bring in third parties, blah, blah, blah. As opposed to newer products or newer systems that they were working on. And then OS host patching there at the bottom. It's interesting though. I suppose I would always think of patching. I would group OS with the component side of things as well. Personally, a lot of organizations, if you think about their patch management policies, everyone's used to. It's Patch Tuesday. You got to run your patches. You got to patch your OS, your servers, all those stuff. You're used to it. There's organizations have policies in place there for that. Component side of things is where people tend to sort of either forget or there's just extra difficulty there in doing it. And I suppose the problem with a lot of the component stuff is that often the newer versions that are released, they're not compatible with the code that you've written for them. So if you have a bespoke app that uses particular Struts framework, and then you change your Struts framework, your code doesn't work anymore. So I mean, that seems to be the biggest barrier, I suppose, to addressing the top one there. Quickly, just on SSL, we found that 2 out of every 3 servers that had had SSL service running on it had a high/medium risk issue on it. And again, that's also pretty significant. I mean, you're talking, I think it was 61.4% of your servers that handle transactions, e-commerce, all that kind of stuff. They're vulnerable to attackers trying to attack the private communications between the web server and your users' browsers due to whatever issues, misconfigurations, or use of weak ciphers, or just general issues there. So I think that's pretty significant. Also, we found last year, for the 2015 period, 25% of servers with an SSL service on it were vulnerable to Poodle. So that was another big one there last year. As well, I think the reason that the stats are so high, the fact that SSL was deprecated then last year as well, sort of didn't help. A lot of people sort of had the fear to just shut it off and move to TLS. So we'll just get into a few thoughts that we were thinking about when we're looking at all these numbers. HTTP security headers is an interesting one. So what do we mean by that? We mean the likes of these different types of headers. We only found 1.73 of our assets actually used an adequate HTTP security header. So there doesn't really seem to be widespread adoption. Now, and then we looked at the flip side of it, and we looked at some of the vulnerabilities that were there, and had some or more of these headers been in place, we figured out that 15% of them would have had either risk mitigation or risk reduction had they had these headers in place. So that was kind of an interesting one. Now, some of these things are relatively easy to implement. You throw them in there, set a few parameters, and should be good. They should work fairly well. Some of them, like content security policy, maybe not so much, because you actually a bit of rework to do in your code. X-frame options, things like that, and strict transport security were sort of easy wins, quick wins. But again, we didn't really see widespread adoption of them, and I'm not sure if that means that, this is something that is just going to sort of fizzle out, or if people are actually going to start adopting them. The big guys now, Google, Facebook, all those guys, they have a lot of these headers all there, and have been using them for a while now, and maybe it's just sort of people are going to eventually sort of follow suit. So a few thoughts on component security. So, who wrote your code? You're a developer. You've got a really cool developer, so you're really happy with that. And then if you think about it, who wrote the code? Your developers use other people's code, either part of the frameworks or whatever. Some other guy wrote that. You don't know who that guy is. And then that guy is used code by somebody else. So, we're kind of like looping it down. And then before you know it, you've got a piece of your enterprise code in there that's been written by Ralph Wiggum. So, looking at that a little bit back as well, I suppose we call it the software food chain. You've got your code, and then you use a piece of commercial off-the-shelf software, you bundle it in, and then you outsource that bit, you use some third-party APIs, and then some subcontractor somewhere has written that, and then he's pulled that stuff he found it on GitHub, and it worked well. And like it's amazing when you think about all the different places where your code comes from. And I suppose then we can have this sort of like degree of trust. We trust our developers. We trust because we've trained them. We know what their coding they follow the standards, and we review their code. When it comes down to all these other bits that we're using as part of that, less so. And I suppose the degree of trust sort of tends to diminish a little bit. And then with that, then I suppose as a ballpark, about 90% then of our application code is actually framework code and the other code surrounding that our code uses. So not actually written by our own developers. And that 63% stat there was taken from the Sonotype report. It's actually the 2014 report. I couldn't find a similar one for 2015, but I thought that was quite interesting. Again, we're talking about frameworks. We're talking about Spring, jQuery, and all those guys. So with component security, it's kind of scary if you think about it. We reran these numbers just as an example. If you look at known vulnerabilities that have been reported in some of these things, see struts 2 there. There's a remote code injection, a huge risk, CVSS score of 10, and yet it's been downloaded nearly 200,000 times since that issue's been reported. Now, I don't know what percentage of them end up being used as in production code or whatever, but I mean, chances are it's going to be running somewhere. So it's kind of interesting. Patching and component management sort of as a whole then, if you think about it, we pulled out the numbers, 63% of issues then could have been mitigated had we had a proper patch management, which included component security, component management combined. That's a huge number. And, I suppose people understand the need for patching. It's sort of there. And I suppose it's about maybe being able to expand that out to include all these other bits of code that you didn't really think about that you had to patch. But it's kind of funny because, you know, we know we have to patch. We patch everything, like we patch our OS, firewalls, firmware, all that stuff. We kind of forget about layer 7 a bit, you know, the code that our code uses. You know, this the dependency check project by Jeremy Long. It's cool. If you haven't checked it out, you should. It will check for known vulnerabilities across a wide range of different languages and technologies for issues, and then it'll let you know what libraries you're using are vulnerable to what, and that way then you can you can properly apply your patches, etc. After that. So what we did as well as part of the stats report, or I suppose review, we did notice that some of our customers actually had tended to do quite well, and we were curious as to how they were able to turn around fixes so quickly. You know, their postures were great. You know, and even sometimes we would find a lot of issues, but they'd have them remediated quite quickly. So we approached some of them, and then we just sort of wanted to tease out what different types of practices they use throughout their SDLC and operations, just to see if there's anything that we could maybe glean, like, okay, well, you guys are doing this, that sounds cool. You know, maybe if other people adopted a similar approach, maybe that, you know, everyone might up their game a little bit. So we have the notion of pushing left. So I suppose just a quick sort of demonstrate the concept, I guess. You know, we know the different coding methodologies, you know, between waterfall and agile. Waterfall, you know, we get our requirements, we get our tech specs, all that stuff done. The product is all developed, and then at the end of it, out goes the product ready to go. And at that point, if there's serious problems in it, it's nearly too late, or it costs a hell of a lot of money to go back and try and rework it. Whereas agile, you know, the mantra there is, you know, fail early, fail often. So we'll keep trying something. You know, it doesn't work, it breaks, great. You're kind of like spread betting. So at least at the end, there's a less chance that the whole project might be a failure. So some of the things then that are best, well, I won't call them our best, that our clients who seem to fare the best when it came to remediating issues, some of the practices that they were doing. Continuous testing and DAST. DAST is dynamic application security testing. So, you know, running things like AppScan and all those different types of test scanning engines. Continuous testing, though, was kind of a weird one because in a weird way, there are customers, so they use a continuous testing platform called EdgeScan, so they all do continuous testing, but looking at it sort of abstractly, a lot of these guys, we found that some of our customers were, you know, as part of when they were pushing out new builds and stuff like that, they were running DAST tools, even open source ones like Zap, Burp, which, you know, you have to pay for, but you can run a lot of these things in headless mode, running your scans, and then, you know, your security team reviewing them. And they were doing this quite frequently throughout their build process as well. So that seemed to be effective. And then on the flip side, we're looking at the dynamic side. On the static side, then, coupling static analysis tools into their continuous integration process as well. So every time they're checking in code every night or whatever, when a new build gets come out, kicks off some SAST engine, looks over their code, you know, they fine-tune the rules, and, you know, they're catching bugs way before they get to the point where you're closer to a finished product. Threat modeling, a lot of them seem to utilize threat modeling, which is great. We found, though, that I suppose it doesn't seem to scale very well. However, doing it at the start of a project seemed to be quite effective. Dedicated security teams, that's probably not that much of a surprise. Yes, they did have a dedicated security team. So the surprise a little bit was that they didn't necessarily have large security teams. You know, it'd be great to throw all this money and have large security teams. Fantastic. Actually, some of the better ones that we found were actually quite small teams, but just teams that seem to utilize automation very well and very effectively. To know I suppose the advantages of where automation can be leveraged to you know, to do what it does good at, and then to know where the human needs to be involved, and that's where they'd spend their personal time. So I think that was quite cool. Sec DevOps, I suppose we're in the DevOps world. I'm not really going to go into it very much, but we're merging sort of application and host development and system administration, and then we're sort of putting security touch points in there throughout that process as well. This seemed to be quite effective. And the last item there is basically component management, and I suppose coupled with some kind of a continuous asset profiling, i.e., we're checking our dependencies. They're checking to see, what, as new, but like even on a regular basis, as issues are raised in their components, and then they're, I suppose the problem with component management does tend to come down to the extra development time that seems to be needed to be involved to get your code working with the newer versions of the frameworks or whatever. So as we're, I suppose, with the pushing left mantra, the traditional attacker defender schedule, used to be, maybe you do point in time or one a year or a few different things at certain times in the year, and then whereas trying to utilize all of these different types of sort of, I suppose, a change in the way you do things, you're upping your game, you're getting in there, you're finding things quicker than you used to. So to wrap up then, we see trends towards Sec DevOps, utilizing DAST and SAST engine into your build process seems to actually be quite effective. Definitely component security and component management is one of the big ones. Definitely being overlooked for various reasons. It's maybe something that, if you've that in your organization, something that maybe you need to bring into your patch management policy, your patch management process. And again, then, we were talking about full stack as well, as opposed to just focusing on web apps or focusing on your OS/host layer. I suppose from an attacker's perspective, they don't care if they find a way through your web app or the underlying host. The breach is a breach. So sort of pulling the two together. Okay, and that's pretty much it. You can download the stats report if you want. It's not a huge read, so it's quite. We tried to make it quite light. There's a link there for it. So yeah, some questions. I see one already. There should be a yeah.
Okay, thank you. Can you speak to a couple of things?
Yeah.
I don't know if I missed part of this, but the holistic approach, you seem to touch upon it a bit, but a holistic approach of, like, let's say IT hygiene, where that term would encompass asset management, configuration management, and vulnerability management, and also talk to the drivers for this. Because what I'm seeing in very large enterprises is that the complexity makes it very painful, almost seemingly impossible, to meet some of the CVE requirements for remediation. Criticals on high assets, for instance, might be 5 days. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
30 days. And then you also have a driver right now, I don't know if people here are familiar with this, is the Federal Trade Commission this past year, through the Wyndham data breach, came out with a ruling where they were able to fine and penalize a private organization that wasn't beholden to PCI or HIPAA, but just because they weren't diligently taking care of preventing a data breach for customers. Wyndham paid many millions of dollars punitively to satisfy that ruling. And the bar has been raised. Before, you used to have 18 months from the time of discovery to demonstrate due care, 6 months, due diligence, another 6 months, and then once you hit the 18th month, then you're into gross negligence if you don't remediate. It's now seen by legal experts as 6 months before you become grossly negligent. So I don't know whether or not you can speak to any of those things. I know it's a broad basis of topics.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. Well, I mean, I suppose it was interesting that you say, you know, it's hard to get a handle on addressing all the different CVs that are coming out, you know, that constantly. But I suppose, you know, a lot of it comes down to categorizing your business assets, you know, effectively. You know, just because you have a particular CVE, a critical one reported for, you know, your enterprise e-commerce app versus an app that you sort of have some general information on, doesn't mean you need to, you know, fix them both at the same time. So I suppose having some kind of process there that, you know, you know, you've rated all your apps to a certain way, and, you know, maybe trying to focus on the issues that are, you know, focus on the assets that are more critical to your business first, you know, and filtering them that way. I don't know. There was a lot of stuff in there. I don't know if there was a specific question or it was just a general thought. Um, um, well, I mean, I suppose I'm not really sure, to be honest. I suppose, you know, I don't know. I can't really. Yeah. All right. Yes.
One very important thread was misconfigured SSL or just SSL problems.
Yes. Yeah.
What's that? Or is it just the wrong cipher?
It can be a range of lots of different things. I suppose if you think about all the different crypto problems over the last 2 years in particular, so yeah, things like Poodle, that was a big one. It can be a range. Like it can be silly misconfiguration stuff, like, you know, ciphers with you know, with weak keys and stuff like that, all the way up to then I suppose you think of the web app layer. Issues related to, you know, cookie session management, that kind of stuff. You know, missing security headers, security, you know, the secure flag and things like that. So it can be a range of different things as well. Yeah. And as well, you know, known vulnerabilities in, you know, say OpenSSL, that kind of stuff as well. The actual.
How big is part of key management?
Vulnerability wise, or
Yeah, I mean SSL is just a big.
yeah, it is a really big area. I know.
There's Nets, HSMs, other security modules around.
Yeah.
Does it matter or?
I'm not sure of the I suppose what the percentages are, you know, relating to them, off the top of my head. But I suppose, yeah, I mean, you're talking about every aspect of it. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different aspects of around SSL, and that's probably why it's so big as well. You know. So, yeah. Cool. Are we good? Anyone? All right. Cool. Thank you very much.